that when we arrive at a subjective truth, we are somehow above objective reality and objective being. And the Eastern way of thinking, I don't know if this is the Eastern way of thinking or just maybe the pre-modern way of thinking, is actually the opposite. That when we exhaust our subjective capacities, we just reveal the extent of our finitude in relationship to objective reality. In other words, like we become humble to the fact that like the world is so much bigger than us, and so much there's so much more to it than we could have imagined. Now you can call that the world, you can call it God, you can call it being, but it's like when we subjectively arrive at a truth, we're not raised above reality. We're precisely brought to our finitude in relationship to it. And
Yeah,
I think that's a really important lesson of Marx and Marxism, because if you really think about it, the first example of this, the thing we're talking about, is Marx himself. Marx, I mean, he reached the pinnacle, the height of thought itself at the time, which was Hegelian philosophy, which he mastered. And Marx was brought to the very humbling conclusion that the real truth of this thought, this subjective truth, if you will, or absolute knowledge or whatever, the real truth of that was something that already existed in reality, which was the proletariat. It was and of all things, the proletariat, right? Like of all things, the most kind of destitute, landless, and kind of
yeah. I mean, there's some extent to which I feel as if when people make or like Marx's own like criticisms of Hegel and things like that, I wonder how much of it is like filtered through because like Marx isn't the same generation of Hegelians, but like this is like going down the line of apostolic succession or whatever of Hegelianism. That like a lot of like the people who came after Hegel kind of aren't they aren't Hegel himself, so they are like I wonder how much of like certain parts of it were emphasized or not in his own education, because that's how I've like interpreted Hegel generally, right? Because like like he says like like the like reality is like the ultimate principle, like
yeah.
that's the whole point, like no matter what,
Yeah, it remains to really be known if I think it's really Hegel's philosophy of right and the way in which people were using it that for Marx represented that Hegel got himself into like a problem, you know?
kind of, but it's like it's not Hegel so much as like the fact that like
The
Hegel
way it
wrote
was
and then
being
there's like 50 more years, like
yeah.
then like
Yeah, definitely, definitely. I mean, I do think, Marx did arrive at something unique. It wasn't just
yeah,
like,
what he does it, what I think, what Marx is like the bigger thing is that Marx is bringing Hegel into like conflict with the school of like British empiricism, and like
mm,
British and like political economy. Like that's like there's like a general long like pretty interesting just intellectual history of things passing back and forth between like Germany and England, like just in like the Reformation too, where like you could think of like Calvinism versus Lutheranism as a sort of dialectic and things like that.
mhm.
That I think is like what is the most influential thing about Marx is like that straddling that line.
Yeah, I agree. And to me, I think it's kind of sad to see like